Hello and welcome to my Yugioh channel. Today we're looking at the brand new OCG ban list, which is coming into effect as of April 1st, 2022. There are currently two new forbidden cards. These are Predaplant, Verde, Anaconda, and Imperial Order. So we'll have a quick rundown of these two cards. Verde Anaconda is a dark attribute plant type link effect monster. Its link arrows are the bottom left and the bottom right. It's linked to with 500 attack points, and it requires 2 effect monsters to summon it. You can target one face-up monster on the field. It becomes dark until the end of this turn. You can pay 2,000 life points and send one fusion or polarization, normal or quick play spell card from your deck to the graveyard. This effect becomes that spell's effect when that card is activated. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn. You can only use each effect of Predaplant, Verde, and Anaconda once per turn. So the reason for its banning is in part due to this card. It's called Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, which is a dark attribute spellcaster type fusion effect monster. It's level 8 with 3,000 attack and 2,500 defense. It requires a Dark Magician and a Red Eyes Black Dragon as fusion material. And its effect is, it cannot be destroyed by card effects. Neither player can target this card with card effects. During your main phase, you can destroy one monster your opponent controls, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack. You can use this effect a number of times per turn, up to the number of normal monsters used as fusion material for this card. Once per turn, when a card or effect is activated as a quick effect, you can discard one card, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card, and if you do that, this card gains 1,000 attack. This card is so easy to be cheated out from the effect of Verde Anaconda, and you can see why it's a pain. It firstly has the ability to just destroy one of your opponent's monsters, so simply you're able to bring of destruction one of your opponent's monsters, and they take that much damage equal to their original attack. So if they've got a high attack monster, a 3,000 attack monster, that could be game ending there. It cannot be destroyed by card effects, which means it's immune to practically most types of destruction effects. You're going to have very specific outs to this card. And lastly, once per turn, when a card is activated, you just discard a card, you can negate the activation, and you get another 1,000 attack points on this card, making it even more difficult to even run over this card in battle. There is a fusion card which basically Red Eyes Fusion, which lets you just fusion summon a Red Eyes Fusion monster using monsters from your deck rather than from your hand or from the graveyard, which means it's very easy to get out this effect with no downsides. The other problem, and the more common one, is this fusion. Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. It's a dark attribute warrior type fusion effect monster, level 8 with 2,500 attack and 2,100 defense. It requires a level 6 or higher hero monster and one Destiny Hero monster as its fusion materials. Monsters your opponent controls lose 200 attack for each hero card in your graveyard. You can only use each of the following effects: Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer once per turn. As a quick effect, you can destroy both one card you control and one card on the field. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can activate this effect. Special summon one Destiny Hero monster from your graveyard during the standby phase of the next turn. So again, there are easy fusion cards that you can actually use alongside this to bring it out through the effect of Verde Anaconda. Very easy conditions to meet. You just need a high level hero monster and a Destiny Hero monster in your deck. Very quick to do. The stat reduction effect is less reliable unless you're specifically focusing your deck around that strategy. But even so, everything it does is reducing your opponent's ability to get over this card. And as for the quick effect, to be able to destroy a card you control and one on the field, it can be anything on the field. That means your card, which might have a trigger effect, or it might be one of your opponents to stop them from actually going off with their combos, even to the respect of if this card is actually destroyed either by battle or card effect, simply by name of it being a Destiny Hero monster, it's able to then revive itself the next turn and continue to whittle down your opponent's life points and their resources until they basically have nothing to counter this card. The problem with this card is it's so versatile within so many different fusion decks that actually it does become ban-worthy simply because too many cards, too many archetypes archetypes can abuse the same effect for any sort of purpose. Imperial Order being the second forbidden card, and you can understand why. It's a continuous trap card with the effect negate all spell effects on the field. Once per turn during the standby phase, you must pay 700 life points. This is not optional, or this card is destroyed. The reason this is such a pain is many of the spell cards are used within Yu-Gi-Oh! These days, actually more so than trap cards, and this kind of shuts down certain decks, spell strikers, and it counters so many different variations on archetypes that rely on their spell cards to get them going into some sort of momentum. They might not be specifically just reliant on spells, but often that's an easier way for them to get to their main pieces or to search for their main pieces. This has had various interactions in that it has been on the ban list, it has been off, in and out for the longest time. It did get an errata, a change to its effect in which not only do you have to pay 700 life points during your turn, but during each standby phase that includes your opponent, which means essentially you're having to double the cost that you're facing. But the thing is, you can just scrap this card as and when you like, so the flexibility in doing that, so long as you can pay life points, you can still use this effect, and you can essentially turn this off when you want to start using your stuff. This is a very difficult card to out, and there are very few ways and options outside of actually getting a specific monster within your archetype, or even if you don't have those specific cards, then you're actually doomed to this effect. The next three cards represent the newly limited list. These are cards which you can have one copy of in any deck. Water Enchantress of the Temple is a water attribute spellcaster type level 3 with 1500 attack and 1200 defense. The effect, if you control an adventurer token, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can banish this card from your hand or graveyard to add one Rite of Amarecia from your deck or graveyard to your hand. If you control an adventurer token, you can place one field spell that mentions adventurer token from your deck face up in your field zone. You can only use each effect of Water Enchantress of the Temple once per turn. I personally am not aware of what the adventurer kind of archetype looks like, so I'm not understanding exactly why it has this issue, but I'm guessing since it's a newer archetype, there seems to be a reason that, this is a searcher for some of the stable cards within the deck. So the ability to search for the Rite of Amarecia and the ability to then actually search and recover one of your field spells from the deck straight to your field is also a bit of a concern. The only reason I think, just from first glance of this card, it's a big concern is to do with Mystic Mine. The ability to just straight out search for any field spell. It's not specific to the archetype, it could be anything. And the only reason I think is Mystic Mine is that problem card that everyone wants to go away. This next card is Rite of Amarecia. It's a normal spell card with the effect, if you control no adventurer tokens, special summon one adventurer token. It's a fairy type, earth attribute level 4 with 2000 attack and defense. Then if you do not control Fateful Adventure, you can place one Fateful Adventure from your deck face up in your spell and trap zone. You cannot activate the effects of monsters on the field the turn you activate this effect, except special summon monsters. You can only activate one Rite Amarecia per turn. I think this card is, the whole idea of it is just to generate the tokens necessary to interact with whatever state this archetype relies on, and then the whole point is to help search for other cards to make the deck more consistent. Fusion Destiny is a normal spell card with the effect, fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck that mentions a Destiny hero monster as material. Using monsters from your hand or deck as fusion material, but destroy it during the end phase of the next turn. Also, for the rest of this turn after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters except dark hero monsters. You can only activate one Fusion Destiny per turn. So the idea of this card is it relies and works on the Destiny Enter Dragoon, which is a fusion of Destiny Hero Dogma and Destiny Hero Plasma. As you can see from the picture, that's the whole representative of the card, and actually when it is destroyed by this card effect, it can actually revive itself by banishing one of your other Destiny Hero monsters. Because this relies on fusing from the deck or the hand as your options, it means you're more likely to get into your fusion monsters far quicker, and since it really doesn't have a downside to it, that's why I can see what it's being limited to one. The next set of cards are the semi-limited list, so these you can have two copies in any one particular deck. First card is Tri-Brigade Fractal. It's a fire attribute beast warrior type level 4 with 1900 attack and 1600 defense. The effect, you can send this card from your hand or field to the grave graveyard, send one level 3 or lower beast, beast warrior, or winged beast monster from your deck to the graveyard. You can banish any number of beast, beast warrior, and or winged beast monsters in your graveyard. Special summon one beast, beast warrior, or winged beast link monster from your extra deck with link rating equal to the number banished. Also, you can only use beast, beast warrior, and winged beast monsters as link material for the rest of this turn. You can only use each effect of Tri-Brigade Fractal once per turn. The biggest problem with this card is it just helps to pitch more of your beast, beast warrior, or winged beast monsters to the graveyard, and actually in banishing them, you're able to go into any of your link monsters from the extra deck so long as they meet the link rating. So you don't actually have to have those cards on the field, they simply have to be accessed from your graveyard. You can think of it as like having a Miracle Fusion, but in this case as a link summoning instead of a fusion summon. That's how I see it. Onamaru, I think, is the link 4, which when it's summoned, or when another beast, beast warrior, or winged beast is actually summoned to the field, gets to just banish one of your opponent's cards. I think it also has the ability to actually summon other cards and generate further advantage, and this is one of the core sections of the deck, which is understandable why you want to reduce its use. Pot of Prosperity is a normal spell card with the effect banish 3 or 6 cards of your choice from your extra deck face down. For the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, any damage your opponent takes is halved. Also, excavate cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of cards banished. Add one excavated card to your hand. Place the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. You can only activate one Pot of Prosperity per turn. You cannot draw cards by card effects the turn you activate this card. The difference between this card and many of the other Pot of Greed style cards that draw 2 cards is this doesn't really have too much of a downside to it. Unlike the others which draw 2 cards and you don't get to search for any information in regards to your deck, you actually get to banish, potentially between 3 or 6 cards from the extra deck. If you're not really using it, then those banished cards aren't going to be much of a loss. Even if you do banish those cards and they do have some impact on your gameplay, those are the cards of your choice. So you can essentially take out the weakest 6 cards of your extra deck, have a look at all the 6 cards you search, and pick the best card from that for your situation, which makes it arguably better because with the Pot of Greed style cards, normally you just draw 2 cards. If they're not good or just not relevant for your situation, they're useless anyway, they're dead draws. The other thing is, even though the other cards go to the bottom of the deck, you can put those in any order, and with most decks being able to kind of shuffle through cards more easily, they're not going to remain on the bottom of your deck for that long. Branded Opening is a quick play spell card with the effect discard 1 card, then take 1 Despia monster from your deck and either add it to your hand or special summon it in defense position. Also, for the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except fusion monsters. If a fusion monster you control would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. You can only use each effect of Branded Opening once per turn. Despias have actually been getting quite popular recently, even with cards such as Fallen of the Albaz, but I don't understand why this has been limited. Perhaps there is a reason for it. If you do know, I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. The only thing I can really think of is it does provide your fusion monster with an additional form of protection by just banishing this card, and actually you do get a special summon of a Despia monster from the deck, so it does give you the advantage if you're requiring a certain effect. Elixir of Scarlet Sanguine is a normal trap card with the effect special summon 1 zombie monster from your deck or graveyard. If you control no Eldritch monsters, you can only special summon Eldritch monsters with this effect. For the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters except zombie monsters. You can banish this card from your graveyard, set 1 golden land spell or trap card directly from your deck. You can only use 1 Elixir of the Scarlet Sanguine effect per turn and only once that turn. Having faced a lot of these Eldritch decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duels, I can understand why this card is being restricted at least a little bit. It gets you to your Eldritch very quickly because it just special summons it from the deck, but that's fine. And even the restriction, if you don't have an Eldritch monster on your field, you just are able to summon it regardless. There isn't really a downside to it except for the limitation of summoning into zombie type monsters. Even in doing that, banishing this card, you're able to just go for any of your golden land spell traps, which means it's additionally another searcher for the deck. It searches twice. That makes it just too much advantage. Orcus Heart Horror is a dark attribute machine type level 4 with 1700 attack and 1400 defense. The effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon 1 Orcus monster from your deck except Orcus Heart horror. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn, except dark monsters. You can only use this effect of Orcus Art Horror once per turn. This is a series of monsters called the Orcus, which basically go into some of these high-level monsters, the high link rating monsters, such as Dengirisu, and many of those have additional triggering effects, and they're very difficult and very annoying to actually out. This is one of the key pieces to getting those monsters together, and I can understand why they're limiting it, but it's still not enough in my opinion. Wind-Up Carrier Zenmaity is a level, it's rank 3 water machine attribute Exceeds monster with 1500 attack and defense. It requires 2 level 3 monsters. Once per turn, you can detach 1 Exceeds material from this card, special summon 1 Wind-Up monster from your hand or deck. When a face-up Wind-Up monster on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, except during the damage step, you can detach 1 Exceeds material from this card to target that monster, return that target to the hand. That is, I can understand why they've kind of restricted it a little, because it's to do with the wind-up loop. The idea is that actually there's another wind-up monster you can summon, and it forces your opponent to discard a card, and actually if you can trigger this effect multiple times, you can eventually end your opponent's ability to have any cards in hand, stopping them from having any resources and putting them into an almost impossible situation to get themselves out of it. It's more of a frustration, and it might be something that some rogue players are playing at the moment, because this card was maybe relevant, I'm going to say about 10 years ago, when Yugioh OCG was out. This is when this came out as well. Harmonizing Magician is a dark attribute spellcaster type Pendulum Tuna monster. It's level 4 with a pendulum scale of 8 and 0 attack and defense. The pendulum effect, all monsters you control gain 100 attack and defense for each face-up pendulum monster that has Magician with different names in your extra deck. The monster effect cannot be special summoned from the extra deck. It cannot be used as material for a fusion, synchro, or exceed summon unless all other materials are Magician pendulum monsters. When this card is pendulum summoned from the hand, you can special summon 1 Magician pendulum monster from your deck in defense position, except Harmonizing Magician, but negate its effects. Also banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use this effect of Harmonizing Magician once per turn. The purpose of this card is it acts very much to do with multiple different decks. It's actually very useful, being a pendulum monster and a tuna monster. It can be used as part of the synchro summon, so long as your other pendulum monsters are Magician based, so that's fine. I think it was used in the summoning of Nirvana High Paladin, which was the big boss monster that actually took out Jet Atlas, and it was necessary at the point because that was how he got into those monsters. He kind of had to go through a step sequence in summoning various monsters and then synchro summoning using this card as part of that requirement. I don't necessarily understand why it's as popular as it is now. Maybe it's because there's more diversity of synchro monsters, there's a bigger pool of them, which means this card can only get more advantage as your opponent has more cards and options to choose from. Night Assailant is a dark attribute fiend type flip effect monster. It's a level 3 with 200 attack and 500 defense. The effect is to flip, target 1 monster your opponent controls, destroy that target. When this card is sent from the hand to the graveyard, target 1 flip monster in your graveyard except this card, return that target to the hand. I'm not necessarily understanding why this is such a threat or why it's been restricted at all, because it cannot target itself. That used to be the case, where because it could recover itself, you could endlessly use this effect. Since you can't, I don't see its viability. I know there are certain cards which can help you to actually bring back some of these monsters in face-down defense position. Shadow Grave is one of those examples. It's a normal spell card which lets you and your opponent summon a monster from your graveyard. It has to be in face-down defense position, so that's why flip effect monsters work with that effect. You also have Burst Return, which is a normal trap card, where you pay 2,000 life points, and you get to summon a monster from your graveyard in face-down defense position. If anyone knows the reason why this has been restricted at all, again, please put those down in the comments. Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, is a water attribute dragon type synchro monster. It's level 9 with 2,700 attack and 2,000 defense. It needs a tuna monster plus 2 or more non-tuna monsters. When this card is synchro summoned, you can banish up to 1 card each from your opponent's hand, field, and graveyard. The card in the hand is chosen at random. This card has been on and off ban lists at various points, at various stages. Obviously, it came out of, I think it was a Hidden Arsenal set, and this was around the Yu-Gi-Oh 5D series, which is why it's a synchro monster. It's arguably one of the most powerful cards, and actually, even though it's part of the Ice Barrier archetype by name. In many cases, it's not even used within the archetype, it's used and splashed into so many generic synchro decks. It's incredibly powerful because it rips the card from the field and the graveyard, which means your opponent is losing that advantage as well as the hand, which means they're losing 3 cards. I know you're technically not either busing or minusing since you're using 3 of your own cards, but considering what this card can do, your opponent is very unlikely to be able to recover those since they're going to banish. I can understand that there are some decks that do like to play these style of cards. I think one of those is Virtual Worlds. They can go into level 9s and rank 9 monsters incredibly quickly. I think True King of All Calamities is another card that they can very easily go into, which is the only justification I can find for this. If you know of any other decks that are currently popular, circulating at the moment, and the reason why it's on the OCG, which is the Japanese ban list, please put those in the comments. The beginning of the end is a normal spell card with the effect: if you have 7 or more dark monsters in your graveyard, banish 5 dark monsters from your graveyard to draw 3 cards. The only reason I can see this being a significant problem is because it's to do with dark graveyard manipulation. There are certain cards, for example, Dark Armed Dragon, Dark Lord Zerato, and there's a few other ones. There's Darkfall Terrace, variations on very unusual dark attribute monsters who can actually special summon themselves, so long as you have either an equivalent certain number of dark attributes in your graveyard or at least a certain amount. By doing this, you're able to draw straight into 3 cards, which isn't a bad thing. The graveyard manipulation is more so, I think, the reason why this is restricted to any point. I still don't understand what the fascination with this card is, simply because it has been around for many years. It's a very old card. Raigeki is a normal spell card with the effect: destroy all monsters your opponent controls. This is a very powerful card, and it's been used alongside things such as Mirror Force and Dark Hole as ways of destroying mass numbers of monsters your opponent controls. The only thing about it is it has been very restricted for many years. It has been on ban lists, it's been forbidden for so long, and then it came out of kind of this restrictions because you started to develop lots of different monsters that had these protection effects, either from spell cards or from destruction effects entirely. These originally started with some of the high-level monsters, but have now put this way into some of the low-level monsters, sometimes the level 4s, in which case it's no longer necessary to ban it, but I think they've restricted it slightly just because not everyone is prepared to counter a Raigeki. Divine Wind Mist Valley is a field spell card with the effect: once per turn, if a wind attribute monster you control returns to the hand, except during the damage check, you can special summon one level 4 or lower wind monster from your deck. I'm not particularly sure why this card is being restricted at all. Maybe it's to do with the Harpy Lady monsters. I know they get to do multiple things, and if they've got various types of effects they can rely on, that's why that'd be useful. Again, I think it's also to do with things such as Dread Unity. Maybe there's something to do with that. Maybe there's also something to do with, I don't know, there's some sort of Thunderies, I think. They have a couple of wind attribute monsters they can rely on that are low levels, but other than that, if you guys know, please put those in the comments. And now we're covering the list of unlimited monsters and cards. This means that you can run a maximum of 3 in any one deck. Poltergeist Multifaker is a dark attribute spellcaster type level 3 with 1200 attack and 800 defense. If you activate a trap card except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. If this card is special summoned, you can special summon one Poltergeist monster from your deck in defense position, except Poltergeist Multifaker. You cannot special summon monsters the turn you activate this effect, except Poltergeist monsters. You can only use each effect of Poltergeist Multifaker once per turn. I think the whole purpose of this card is that since it activates and it gets to special summon other Poltergeist monsters from the deck, this is the reason why it's kind of been limited in the past, because your deck relies on running various trap cards. You can trigger those whenever you like freely, activate getting those card advantages from the deck, and then being able to go into your various link monsters through this effect. It's the keystone to the Poltergeist archetype. Memories of Hope is a normal spell card with the effect: draw cards equal to the number exceeds monsters with different names you control. You can only activate 1 Memories of Hope per turn. The reason I think this has now gone to unlimited is because not everyone is running number style decks. I know the Utopia ones are still quite popular, so that would be a reason why this has been limited in the past. There's also a very degenerate strategy that that people have played to do with the Numeron code. There's a field spell card and the various Numeron monsters that were used as the main villain of Yu-Gi-Oh! Zeal came into play. And when he was doing this, he used the Numeronia cards, and they went from numbers 1 to 4. Essentially, if you get all 4 of those cards out, you could then draw 4 cards, so it does provide significant advantage. I am concerned this might be a way of shifting people back to that rogue strategy. Next card is a Hero Lives. This is a normal spell card with the effect: if you control no face-up monsters, pay half your life points, special summon one at level 4 or lower elemental hero monster from your deck. This is quite a dangerous card to let loose at 3, simply because most players will go into the Shadow Mist and then start searching for their various cards through those combos, or they can go through other directions. They could go for Blaze Man and then search for Harmonization. That's always an option. At the cost of, I know this is half your life points, so if you're starting at the point of the beginning of the duel, you are losing 4,000 life points, but maybe the card advantage is more than enough for what you require. And if you can get your certain cards up, I'd argue that's actually far better than the life points you have to pay for this card. Tripling this out means that you're going to see a lot more hero players in the mix. And the final card is Metaverse. This is a normal trap card with the effect: target one field spell from your deck and either activate it or add it to your hand. Many archetypes actually rely heavily on their field spells to get any sort of resources or the advantage, and because of this, that's why this card has been reduced and limited at certain points within the years. Also, couple this with Mystic Mine, and that's a very good reason why this has been banned and hated almost as much as Mystic Mine in the past. People argue because there are so many field spells now that actually this card is a staple. I can understand why it's been put back to 3. Maybe running 3 is arguably too many and can actually break your hand, so there's always that disadvantage. It's just giving players the option of running 3 or however they feel depending on the state of their decks. I think it's fine personally. I don't see it making too much difference. If you feel differently, please put those in the comments and let me know what you thought of this brand new ban list. Is there anything you would have liked to have seen on it? Is there anything you think doesn't deserve its place on there or should have been higher or lower on that list? I'd love to hear your feedback.
Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and it really helps to support my channel.